Hello. Thank you for joining me for a brief update of the board presentation that took place on November 23rd. So that evening, I spoke about the impact of Emergency Order Number 10, the student supports that we are continuing to expand, and their connection to equity, our phased restart status, the results of our survey, and action steps connected with many of the issues I just mentioned. As you know, our goal is always to get our students back to school. So emergency order number 10, it came out rather suddenly, and unfortunately, it came out just before the very first scheduled practice for hockey and basketball. So the emergency order number 10 significantly impacted sports, and I'll talk about that a little more later. And it also had an impact on what we could do at Oregon Community Pool. We know that our winter sports practices will resume after the order ends. And I reminded people that an order is actually a requirement as opposed to a recommendation or a guideline. For support services, I spoke about on the orange side of the screen the things that we are already doing, things that are new since the last time I spoke to the board is we have our student surveys and well checks completed for grades 5 through 12, and a follow-up process is underway, and I'll talk about that in a little bit too. And then we're also having a behavior and emotional social traits screener for students in grades 3 and potentially grade 7, but we're starting with grade 3. And that is actually a caregiver survey. So while the last survey for students in grade 5 through 12 was to the students, the one for students in grade 3 will be to the parents. So you have possibly seen this slide before, as we've used it a few times, and you'll notice that our 14-day average is now up to 439. And I recalled with the board during the meeting that we had all been shocked the first time it went over 100. So we know that it has climbed in a way that I don't think any of us have necessarily imagined. And all of the organizations that have put together metrics related to when schools should be opening and closing were far beyond anything that those metrics prepared us for, meaning our case count is far higher than even the highest point on any of those charts. And as new research continues to come in, I believe that many of the organizations will be updating the information regarding school openings, as I expect public health will be, as what we know about the virus continues to evolve. Community transmission. This is published every Thursday right around 5:30 on the public health website, and it depicts the communities who had a rate of transmission that was significantly higher than the Dane County average. And thankfully, you'll see that Brooklyn is not on the list. It was for a few weeks, and thankfully, it's off. Fitchburg remains so. And in a separate note, but connected, Oregon was actually listed in the narrative of this portion of the public health report as one of the communities that grew in its number of cases, or had a significantly larger number of cases than the previous week. This is how all of this impacts our students. And I'm going to reduce my picture here so you can see a little bit more in the corner, because this was our COVID data update for the district on Friday, November 20th. This week, we'll actually update our chart on Wednesday, but this was accurate data as of last Friday at noon. We had no positive cases for staff of the staff who were at school. We had 4 positive student cases of the students who are at school. And note that we don't necessarily know when a student who is in online programming or in phased restart, we don't necessarily know when the positive cases occur. We have 17 staff members in quarantine and 46 students in quarantine. And that becomes an issue because we're figuring out good ways to keep our students up to date in their classwork when they are away from us for 14 days, meaning our students who are in person, learning in person. Um, so we're finding ways to make sure they get what they need. The challenge is really when our staff is in quarantine, because we need to find class coverage. We need to find someone to do the job that the person who's in quarantine can no longer do. And even if a person is in quarantine and feels well, for instance, a teacher, that teacher could teach class remotely, but there still needs to be an adult in the classroom ensuring student safety. You've seen this graphic before. It indicates where we are in the phased restart process, that our next step is grades 3 through 5. I'm, despite the numbers, very optimistic because I think the latest research is really indicating that younger students in school is safer than originally thought. So I'm hoping that that is the direction that we are going related to the organizations who are redoing metrics, including public health. So, what action steps are we taking to prepare for a phase in of more grades? Well, as I mentioned previously, additional staffing is necessary in order to cover the duties of people who are in quarantine. Consequently, we are advertising for more paraprofessional positions and more substitute positions to be filled. They're posted on Weekend, and we have also made a post on the Oregon Facebook page. However, there really were only 3 applicants in the month of November. And so that's why we're really asking our community to help us. And that's what the Facebook page post was about, is asking our community, are there people out there that perhaps you could send this information to and they might be interested in helping? We have very loyal substitutes who have been wonderful as far as colleagues in this time of crisis and throughout, many years before. But a lot of those really valuable substitutes have taken positions for us already because there are still people who are out of the classroom for a variety of reasons, the ones that existed pre-pandemic. And so a lot of our valued substitutes have already filled those positions. We've also hired some substitutes to just come to the in-person schools every day, knowing that we will need them. Somebody's going to be out. So we're prepared in that way. However, we need more people. And we'll be placing an ad in the Observer next week because we know how critical this is. We've also, we have a plan to increase our nursing time because our nurses do the contact tracing for students. And as they add in more grades, we will need more of their time to do timely contact tracing because that is a job that can't be put off till later in the day. It has to happen as immediately as possible. So, related to family preparation and communication, our next step will take place in the week of December 7th through 11th. We will have an informational video for families so that they understand the possibilities for semester 2 and what that could look like. And then people will be asked to select either Oregon Online or phased restart for semester 2. And we need some of that information because we need to ensure a balance in the cohort groupings. Because remember, in our efforts to keep our students 6 feet apart for most of the day, which has been very valuable as a practice because it is contributing to the lack of spread and it's contributing to the lower numbers of students in quarantine. If our students were closer than 6 feet, then we'd have significantly more quarantines and potentially more spread. So we still have to engage in a hybrid. And we need to understand how to balance the groups so that there are an equal number of groups in each cohort. So we need to know what families prefer. We also need to plan for transportation. And it's definitely our hope that we will have more grades in school for in-person instruction second semester. As far as winter sports, as I mentioned, emergency order number 10 really had an impact. So our students in hockey and girls basketball were able to have an in-person practice prior to the order being implemented. And in that practice, they were able to converse with their coach and understand the necessary safety practices for when we are able to return and talk about what it will look like in the weeks that we cannot be in person. Boys swimming, boys basketball, and wrestling unfortunately had their meetings planned for this week. Consequently, they had to have virtual meetings. We hope to resume practices December 16th or at the earliest date that we are able to, and more details will be coming directly from the coach of the sport. And then as far as action steps, there'll be a student athlete leadership team meeting. I'll speak about student leadership in just a moment because it's really critical to how we do our best for kids right now. So this is an example of the family survey update. We wanted to give you an update on what we're doing with our family survey information because we're very grateful that so many of you took the time to fill it out, and we utilized the information very well. So we're, once again, very grateful. The question in this one is, my student is being challenged academically in classes, and families answered yes or no. So as an example of how we are breaking down each question, I'll tell you a little bit about how we broke this down into actionable steps. So for our kindergarten through grade 2, you see the number of total responses from families, the percentage, a number and percentage of families who said yes and those who said no. And then you see it broken down in specific grade bands. You'll also notice that there's a larger percentage of families in the younger grades who are concerned about their children being academically challenged. However, that concern exists across the board. So, knowing this, our principals took the survey results, went back, broke it down by grade level, scheduled discussions with teams, and that is teams of instructors, as well as leadership teams who are representative of the entire school staff. And then they came up with some actionable items. And as an example of some actionable items related to this particular question, look at the center column. We have added more academic extension opportunities. We, for the younger grades, have added capabilities to a specific tool that we use called News ELA. Sometimes you'll hear it referred to as Newsella. So you might hear it both ways, and I want to make sure you recognize it. But it's a tool that allows us to adjust the reading level for articles, and now with enhanced features, even textbooks that are coming from Newsella. And that ensures that no matter the student's reading level, they're able to access rigorous content and engage with discussions around rigorous ideas. And knowing that students are in a variety of places related to their reading level, this kind of tool really ensures that we're able to go deep with all ideas for all students. And then the principals are working with grade levels to identify additional opportunities to create a challenge to help our students stretch. You'll see the other two columns that flank the middle, creating more interaction or social interaction opportunities. Our teachers and our principals are doing quite a bit to ensure we're creating more interactive opportunities. RCI almost doubled the number of clubs that they offer on Wednesday to ensure that there's something for everybody. There's some open study halls, meaning kids all come at the same time and do work together, and that ends up being a time for some socialization also. More breakout groups, more special interest groups, lunch bunches. Our teachers are inviting students in to have lunches with them and their friends virtually, and more Wednesday opportunities. All of these things are coming from what families told us students needed. And then we've had the opportunity to break down some of our student data also. So what families and what students are telling us are informing all of the action steps we're taking to continue to improve. And then making more connections with our students who are struggling, more direct outreach, individual invitations, assignment checklists for students who are having a hard time keeping things organized, because that's very challenging, whether we're in a brick and mortar or virtual world, and increasing the number of students who are invited to learning hubs. Now, our student survey for students in grades 5 through 12, we had a response rate of 80%, which is in an average survey an enviable response rate. However, with our students, anytime I see something like 80, my thoughts, in addition to the thoughts of my colleagues, go directly to what about the other 20? Who are they? How are they feeling? How are we able to get their input? And when you see the percentage of students who responded in grades 5 all the way through 12, you'll notice that the percentage gets a little bit smaller at the grade of 11 and 12. So we know that there will probably need to be more outreach specifically to the students who didn't answer the survey, because we need to know how they're feeling, what they're thinking, and we want their feedback. So, the responses to the survey, when we asked our students how this experience compares to last spring, we noticed that their feelings were similar to their parents. About 77% of them felt that the online experience is somewhat better or much better. So, as I mentioned before, our thoughts often go to that 23%. How do they feel? And or what did they think about, what opinions do they have about why it's not as good as last spring? So, a lot of times when we see information like this, we know that it may be an opportunity for focus groups, because we can learn by listening to the individual experience of students when they're in a group sharing all of those experiences with one another. As far as classroom logistics, you can see our students feel very confident related to how to access their online classroom and who to go to for help with classwork. And similar to parents, our students are more unsure regarding who to contact for help. Consequently, we will be sending out more messaging to our families and to our students about how to get help if they're stuck with a Chromebook issue. This is a very interesting slide. It contains a lot of information. You'll see that our students feel that the real-time learning, 80% of them feel like we have that amount of time right, that what they're experiencing is working for them. 15% say too much, and 5% say too little. So, in general, we feel that our students think that there is the right amount of real time, but we're always interested in learning more by talking to the students who answered on either end. And you see there's a bit of a difference related to what the students think and what their parents feel or their caregivers feel. And then as far as the amount of independent time, once again, a slight difference between caregivers and students. And we have about 70% of our students feeling that they have enough independent learning time. And it's very interesting to note that the same amount of students and parents feel that perhaps there is too much independent learning time. About a quarter of our students and families feel that way. So once again, we want to talk about how to add in um, how to react to that in a way that's helpful to our students. What can we do when they feel like they perhaps have too much independent time, and how to break that down, and where do we see it by grade level and sometimes even by individual. And answers to the academically challenged question. Is your child academically challenged? We have our students and our caregivers giving slightly different opinions. Our students, 9% of them say no, and 91% of them say yes. So for the 9% to say no, well, we're doing deep dives by grade level and by school, and we're following up with groups and individuals based on these findings. Now, relationships. Um, this was a very, very interesting one, because you see that the feelings of our caregivers and our students were identical related to the relationship with at least one teacher from school. 86% of our students said yes, 14 said no. But what's really interesting is then the next question is, there is at least, or the next statement for the students to react to. There is at least one adult I can talk to at school if I am struggling. 95% of our students said yes to that question, and 5% said no. So clearly, we're following up individually with the 5%. That's really important. But also remember, there are 20% of our students who didn't answer the question because they didn't fill out the survey. So we have a large number of students that require follow-up. It's really important that we are making those connections, and there were plans in place already, and we're just adding more to it now based on these results. So you'll notice that a good portion of our students requested checks, wellness checks, or just, I want someone to check in with me. Oops, I'm sorry. It doesn't necessarily mean that they wanted a wellness check. I'm going to close this picture so you can see the whole thing. You see that about 70 of our fifth graders said, maybe I want someone to contact me. And about 19 students said, yes, I do. And then that you follow all the way through the grades. And so what's happening with that is we are checking in via phone call with all of our students who said yes and our students who said maybe, and making sure that there is a connection when a connection is requested, because it takes a lot, we think, for someone who is 12 or 14 or 16 to say yes, please call me or please connect with me. That's really important that we do. So between school counselors and administrators and school psychologists and all of the team members are dividing up and making calls and ensuring that our students have what they need, and even if what they need is just someone to talk to right now. Action steps. So, as I mentioned, we've already started the check ins and they'll continue. We're comparing the themes. We will not be reporting out on what individuals say, of course, but general themes that we're pulling from the many conversations we're having with students. And we'll report those themes on December 14th. So, according to our students, when we ask them open ended questions about what went well, you see that they said many things. The flexibility, they like parts of being at home. Some of them appreciate the Wednesday workday. A lot of positives about the real time learning. Grades 11 and 12 especially mentioned their appreciation for the block schedule, as it makes it so that they have fewer classes at one time. And a lot of people mentioned that it's much more organized than the spring, which we would expect. So these are all the themes in the individual or the open-ended questions that were very positive. Now, when we asked them, how could we improve? Uh, we heard about more clarity on homework and assignments. Excuse me. Some of our students in grades 7 through 12 said maybe fewer assignments. Our youngest survey respondents had some mixed feelings about homework. Uh, some people at the high school, or some of the respondents at the high school, said that they'd like to see classes more spread out, and potentially reduce the length of classes, which is interesting because there were also people who said they love the block, which requires longer classes. Um, Similar to parents, more socialization opportunities and some ideas on how to restructure the real-time classes. So these were the major themes that were pulled out, and our students had some really incredible things to say. When we asked our students what healthy habit would they like to employ next, because we really wanted to make sure that they were thinking about healthy habits, and we also thought it would be really good information for the adults in their life to know what they're thinking related to how they want to improve their health and wellness. And so you can see the answers on the screen. I think our students are very insightful, and we want to, as a school district, do as much as we can to support them in these habits, as I'm sure families do also. Oops, sorry about that. So the action steps for the student surveys, as I mentioned, following up with individual students, holding student feedback groups. We have a staff survey that just closed Monday morning. By the time it closed, we actually had over what I listed here is 379. We actually had over 400 responses, and the themes of that survey will be presented at the next board meeting. We also are excited to talk about our medical work group, and here are the goals for the group. Those have remained the same since this idea was first brought forward, and you can see that here. And now we actually have members. So I'm excited about that. You can see that we had an amazing amount of people who will be joining us for this team. I think we ended up with 16 members, which is considerably more than we anticipated. But I'm telling you, we had 55 applicants or volunteers, and we would have been proud to work with any one of them. We have very well qualified people in our community who are interested in being of service to our students, and we're very grateful for all of the people who volunteered to help us. So you can see we selected the volunteers based on areas of medical expertise, including some data analysis expertise, which I think will be very helpful too. And we have our first meeting next week. So, as far as an equity update, which is now a part of every board presentation because it is a priority in our school district, and consequently, I'd like to continue to bring it forward every meeting. So, what I'll speak about is what we're doing related to student, family, and community education, the anti-hate speech implementation, and the curriculum review plans. So on December 1st at 7 p.m., we are fortunate enough to host another community forum with Nehemiah on how to interrupt racism. So we publicize that via email, the social media, and our website. And we'll definitely be sending reminders or we won't send reminders of the event. If you register, you will get a reminder, but we'll continue to bring it up too, I promise. So you can register for it through a link that I'm sending out in the weekly updates or on the website. And if you register, that means they will send you reminders. However, you don't have to register. If you just click on the link, you can join it even the evening of. Related to anti-hate speech implementation, we met with some really impressive students on Monday morning from the Multicultural Student Union and the Allies in Action Group. And they spoke with us about things that they would like to see happening at the high school and in the school district in general, and the high school specifically. And it's one amazing example of student leadership. In addition to the leadership that's coming from student council with the representatives that are on the school board, Andrew Palmer and Chloe Jacobson, in addition to the students who were asked to be representatives for the athlete leadership team to help everyone stay on the same page with communication. We really are fortunate to have this group of students and all that they're doing. And it makes me feel very good about our future, knowing the great kids who are about to take this on. So, right now, for the anti-hate speech policy, we are designing lessons, or cross-district teacher teams are designing lessons that are specific to grade levels and that focus on our students' responsibility for creating a culture of safety and belonging. We want to help everybody understand what they can do to create the culture where everyone feels safe, welcome, and knows they belong. And the lessons will begin next month. And parent communications will happen through multiple venues. There'll be an introduction at the community forum that mentions our policy. We'll have a Q&A session in the month of December, and I'll continue to bring it up in the informational updates. And the anti-hate speech implementation task force meets again on December 2nd to talk about the scope and sequence of the lessons that are being sent out to our students. Oh, and one more great thing, our high school students are helping to design the lessons that will be a part of the student experience at that level, and their input will be invaluable. Here's some examples of the type of lessons we're talking about. We're focusing in on the social justice standard of identity and different things about identity that are age appropriate. What's important about who you are. So for our youngest learners, there are a variety of things that we mentioned about what's important to you and who you are. And as an example, I included a slide from one thing they're doing, which is called All About Names. And it's reading a story about a young girl whose name is continuously mispronounced and how that makes her feel, and how her mother teaches her about the musicality of names from around the world. So that's one example for our youngest students. Our students in grades 3 through 5, one example is the culture tree. And that is what's above the ground. What are the things that other people can see that are a part of your identity? And then what are the things that people can't see that are a part of who you are, like your experiences or your beliefs or your perspective? Our students in grades 6 through 8, one example is a focus on how murals are reflective of a community's identity and how could that possibly translate into the student experience here. For action steps, we're working with the Dane County Equity Consortium related to some action research, and we're creating something called an impact question that will guide our work specific to a curriculum review. So, examples of the action questions that haven't been completely refined, but you'll see them here on the screen. And it's really about how does creating a more inclusive and diverse curriculum increase a sense of belonging in the school community. And in particular, related to if we just look at one area, one curricular area, social studies, what can we do that will result in an increase in students' sense of belonging? The picture is meant to represent the fact that our journey toward creating a more equitable educational environment is not a linear one. There will be some times that we will go down a road and back up. There'll be times when we have a detour because our pathway to creating the type of school, the type of culture that our students need us to have will probably not be a step one, step two, step three. It'll probably be continuing to learn and grow, making adjustments along the way, including our students, including our community. And when you do that, things aren't always linear. And we know that and we expect it, and we're welcoming the journey. Thank you all very much. Appreciate all of the time you spent listening. I tried to go as quickly as I could because I know this is an investment of your time. I appreciate it. Good night.